Hi, Mr. Best's class. Good morning, or at least it's morning where I am right now. I get to read to you two books today, but I'm going to send them in separate videos. So, in case you're wondering why I'm wearing the same outfit in both videos, I'm recording them both in the same day. And I am all the way in Missouri, the state of Missouri. I am at my mom and dad's house for the holidays, so I am reading to you from afar. So I can't wait to share with you the books I have, though, because these are books that I had when I was your age, when I was in first grade, and I love these books. So let's get started. The first one I am going to read to you is called Auntie Claus, and it is by Elise Primavera, and she was the author and the illustrator of this book. And I really like the illustrations. I really like the art that's in this book. It's very fun. So I hope you enjoy. All right, Auntie Claus. There's the end pages. It's a dog ice skating. Right. The Kringle family lived high atop the luxurious Bing Cherry Hotel in New York City, and they loved Christmas. They kept a Christmas tree up all year round. Mr. Kringle was president of the renowned Jingle Bell Bell Company. Mrs. Kringle owned the fabulous Mistletoe to Nail Salon over 56th and 5th. They had even named their young son after you know who. Okay, does anybody have any guesses as to who you know who is? They love Christmas. So who would they name their son after? You think it might be Santa Claus? But actually, his name is not Santa Claus. Does anybody know what another name for Santa is? It's Kris Kringle. So their son's name is Chris. All right. Sophie and her little brother had everything. But if you asked, was it enough? No, they would say. Was it enough to have their own private soda fountain? No, they would shake their heads back and forth. Or clothes and books galore? No, 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 they would scream. It had been suggested by their great aunt, Auntie Claus, that maybe Sophie and her little brother were given too many presents. You can never have too many presents, sniffed Sophie. That's my motto. So do you think they're maybe a little spoiled? They get everything they want. Maybe they're a little spoiled. Yes, everyone in the Kringle family loved Christmas, but no one loved it more than Auntie Claus. Auntie Claus lived at the Bing as well, penthouse 25C. Every afternoon, Sophie was summoned there for tea. Each day, Auntie Claus would instruct Sophie on a different topic. One day it might be Christmas trees. Always pick a nice full one, darling, and springy needles. Another day, decorating. You must drape the garland, darling, one strand at a time. You must never throw it on. After they finished tea, Auntie Claus would close with these words of wisdom. And darling, always remember my first and final rule. Whether it's birthdays, Christmas, or Halloween, it is far better to give than to receive. Can you see her face? Does she look surprised? Looks like it's because the cookie's flying in the air to Auntie Claus's plate. Sophie wondered about her great aunt a lot. She's so mysterious, Sophie thought. And this was true. There were many strange going-ons up in the penthouse 25C. Most people considered Auntie Claus just another eccentric New Yorker. Eccentric means kind of different. But Sophie knew that there was more to her than met the eye. For instance, what was the diamond key that was always hung from a silver ribbon around her neck? Just a bit of costume jewelry, darling, her great aunt would say, then quickly change the subject. Why did Auntie Claus leave every year right after Halloween and not return until Valentine's Day? Just a business trip, darling, and she changed the subject again. Where does she go? Sophie wanted to know. Once again, it was Halloween, and Auntie Claus announced, In 1 week, I'm off on my annual business trip. What kind of business are you in, anyway? Sophie had asked. That, darling, is something for me to know and for you to find out. Auntie Claus had said with a twinkle in her eye, and this was exactly what Sophie intended to do. This year, I have a plan. I'll stow away. Sophie had made up her mind. Stow away means sneak, like kind of hide or sneak into a space so she can travel with Auntie Claus without Auntie Claus knowing. As she was leaving, Sophie said, I'm going on a business trip with Auntie Claus. Marvelous, darling. Be home in time for Christmas. There's a good girl, said her mother. Do take your mittens, said her father. I'm going too, said her little brother. Oh, no, you're not, said Sophie. Can if I want to, he said. Cannot, she said. Can too, he cried. Cannot, she yelled. Wah! Sophie could hear his ear-splitting scream start to fade as she ran out the door. There we go. Sophie tiptoed into Auntie Claus's apartment. There were many boxes and trunks waiting to go. Choosing the largest, Sophie pushed aside the capes and furs and wiggled inside. Quietly, she made a little peephole in the cardboard so she could see everything that was going on. Auntie Claus entered the room. She removed the diamond key that hung from the ribbon around her neck. Next, she placed the key into the lock of her old elevator. The door slid open. The boxes and trunks were loaded. The door slid shut. Look at the dogs. They're carrying the suitcase. That's crazy. Oh, this is fun. Okay, we got to flip the book. Vroom! The elevator shot up in the air and out into space. They were going up, up, up. Minutes, an hour passed, and still they were going up. Sophie could feel it, getting colder and colder and colder. From her peephole, she could see stars zipping by. Or was that snow? We can't possibly be in New York any longer, she thought. Where do you think they're going? Let's find out. The elevator landed with a thunk. Tipping over Sophie's box, she could no longer see, but she thought she heard cheers. The sound soon faded until all became completely silent. Thinking it was safe, she climbed out of the box. Where am I? Sophie whispered. You must be the new elf, a little man said. That's it, said Sophie. I'm the new elf. Who are you? I'm Mr. Pudding, he said. Oh dear, you're in violation of elf rule number 3. What do you mean? Asked Sophie indignantly. He pulled a worn green and red book from his pocket. On the cover, it read, Elf Rules and Vital Information. He pointed to the section marked Dress Code. Sophie read it aloud. Always look neat, always look snappy. A well-dressed elf always feels happy. Follow me, he said, and trotted off into the darkness. Where are we going? Shouted Sophie. Hurry, hurry, Mr. Pudding called over his shoulder. Only 48 days left. I think he means 48 days left till Christmas. Mr. Pudding put Sophie right to work in the mailroom. It seemed to her as good a place as any to begin her search. Where was Auntie Claus, and what was she doing here? For days Sophie lived among the elves and did her best to blend in. She slept on a cot in the elf dormitory. She ate her meals in the cafeteria. No one suspected. Every day Mr. Pudding appeared. "Hello, Elf Sophie. Settling in?" he asked. "The uniform is itchy and the hours are long," said Sophie. "This is hard work." Oh dear, said Mr. Pudding. He pulled the old green and red book from his pocket. "Elf rule number 2, Mr. Pudding recited. An elf's work is never done, but hard work never hurt anyone. Rules schmoles, thought Sophie. Look, she looks frazzled. Looks like it's really hard work. 4 weeks. Sophie looked high and low for Auntie Claus, but now it was almost Christmas, and she had turned up nothing. Sophie was worried. If she didn't find Auntie Claus, how would she get home? If she didn't get home, how will I get all my Christmas presents, she thought. Just then Mr. Pudding appeared. "Hello, Elf Sophie," he said. "Good news. You have excelled in the mailroom and may proceed to package wrapping. After that, we'll all pitch in on sleigh packing." "I'm not going to package wrapping, and I'm not going to sleigh packing. I want to go home," Sophie yelled. "I have to get all my—" But before she could finish, Santa's voice interrupted over the PA system. So are Santa and Auntie Claus watching Sophie from afar? Yep. "It's that time of year again," his voice boomed, "and I was hoping one of you would volunteer to go to the coal mines and pick up the BB&G list." Sophie whispered to Mr. Pudding, "What's the BB&G list?" "Oh, it's short for Bad Boys and Girls. Any boy or girl on that list goes without presents, or worse, for Christmas." Sophie swallowed hard. Uh-oh, she thought. Mr. Pudding continued, "Only the bravest elves would volunteer for such an awful job." Yes, a brave elf, thought Sophie, or else a girl who thinks she might be on that list. She raised her hand high. "I'll go," she said. As Sophie made her way toward the coal mines, she could hear the chanting of the BB&G elves. "Spoiled brats and crybabies, wine babies, and all the ones who don't believe. Here's some coal and here's some gunk. Fill a stocking that smells like skunk." Sophie went down, 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 where it became darker and darker. Finally, she reached the very bottom, and there was the list. Sophie looked for her name, but it wasn't her name she saw on the list. It was "My own little brat of a brother," she cried. "Chris is on the Bad Boys and Girls list." Well, she thought, once she'd gotten past the shock of it, they do kind of have a point. But then she pictured the two of them on Christmas morning. There would be lots of presents for her, and nothing for her little brother. On his favorite day of the year, Chris would find only a stinky stocking filled with coal and gunk. He will be so disappointed. He will be so sad, Sophie said. She quickly erased his name, but now there was a large telltale gap on the list. There was only one thing to do. Sophie took a deep breath and wrote down her own name instead. The ink wasn't even dry on the page when some kind of really strong magic happened. Right before her eyes, the list, the BB&G elves, and the coal mines vanished, and Sophie was whirling around and around, hurling through the air in a blur of Christmas red and green. Was she up? Was she down? Sophie was standing on the stage of the grand ballroom. A clock struck midnight. Santa began to speak. "She's always on time. She works harder than anyone I know, including me. Ho, ho, ho! In short, she does things right, and I would be lost without her. Let's have a big round of applause for my sister." The curtain opened. Auntie Claus, Sophie shouted. Auntie Claus, everybody cheered. Hooray for Auntie Claus. Turning to Sophie, Auntie Claus winked and said, Come along, darling. You must be home in time for Christmas. Wow, so Auntie Claus is Santa's sister. Sophie was about to climb onto the sleigh when Mr. Pudding appeared. He was waving the green and red book in the air. Oh dear, he cried. Auntie Claus, Sophie can't leave until she knows the first and final rule. The rule, see? It says so right here under departing procedures. The reindeer stopped restlessly and shook their head, as if to say, Let's go, let's go. Sophie knows the first and final rule, Mr. Pudding, Auntie Claus said. I do, said Sophie. Yes, you do. Now hop onto the sleigh. There's a good girl. Sophie jumped onto the sleigh and it rose up into the sky. Goodbye, goodbye, she called. She could barely hear her aunt's voice over the wind and the snow. I knew you had it in you. Merry Christmas, darling. The sleigh picked up speed. Ho, 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 Santa laughed as the stars whizzed by. Sophie closed her eyes. Her face stung with the cold. Oh, there's the Statue of Liberty. It looks like they're close to New York. When Sophie opened her eyes, she could barely believe what she saw. She was in her own bed again. She ran down the stairs towards the living room. Please let him get his presents, she whispered to herself. Under the tree was her little brother. His cheeks were red, his eyes sparkled, his belly shook with laughter. Merry Christmas, Sophie, he bellowed. Merry Christmas, Chris, Sophie said, with a great sigh of relief. It was then that she realized Auntie Claus is right. I do know the first and final rule, she said to herself. It is far better to give than to receive. There is something here for you, her mother said. Her mother and father said proudly. They handed Sophie a tiny box with a card. Inside was a diamond key hanging from a red ribbon. It's from Auntie Claus, Sophie said. Where is Auntie Claus anyway? Chris piped up. On a business trip, darling, Sophie said, and smiled mysteriously. Suddenly, a thought occurred to Chris. She's never here on Christmas, he said. What kind of business is she in anyway? That is something for me to know and for you to find out, Sophie said. And someday he would. But that's another story. The end. The note says, from Auntie Claus, for my dear niece Sophie, you really are a chip off the old block. Love, Auntie Claus. All right, and that is the story. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know that was a longer one, but I think it's a good one. All right, well, I can't wait to read my next book with you guys, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.